Frank Sesno has been asking questions for decades. He has interviewed people from all walks of life, including many leaders from around the world. Through these experiences, he is able to break down multiple types of questions, sharing their power through strategic layers of discovery. Ask More is Sesno's breakdown of how the right questions can lead to the right answers. To get there, it's crucial to know what answers we are really trying to seek. Sometimes it's a story, sometimes it's a clear answer, and more often than not, more questions come from those answers. I am going to focus on just a few of the types of questions that resonated with me the most because of my own experiences. I will pause to reflect on some aha moments to show how concepts described by Sesno will support me in my leadership endeavors. Ask for the bad, don't duck the issues or avert your eyes. Ask direct questions in search of direct answers. It may get ugly, but if you want to fix a problem, you have to acknowledge it to deal with it. Sesno explains diagnostic questioning through the eyes of Teresa Gardner, a nurse practitioner who works deep in the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia. The population in this area are not just poor, but they're also typically very ill. She begins with questions which connect the symptoms and specifics. Open-ended questions such as how they're feeling and how long it has been. Then she asks the hard questions, looking for short answers such as when was the last time they ate and when was the last time they'd seen a doctor. She listens to the stories of her patients, studying their history. This is how she finds out how hard people are working and how little health insurance they have. The stories are what bring to the surface answers which may not have been obvious at the beginning, but are deeply connected to the problem. For one patient who was having a diabetic attack, Teresa found out through conversation how the patient was splitting their insulin with a relative because they couldn't afford enough for the both of them. Even though Teresa had narrowed down the actual problem before the story, by asking again, she confirmed her diagnosis by getting the full story. Businesses can be just like people. If problems are not addressed in the beginning, it's like trying to fix someone who waited way too long for treatment. Sesno described another scenario where an auto parts manufacturer was bleeding money and couldn't figure out how to fix the predicament they were in. Steve Miller, who headed the team who ultimately saved the company, was known to ask the big, bad questions. Why is the company in so much trouble? Where do the problems originate? What isn't working? His solutions were not popular, but the challenges the company faced required bold moves. He found the bad, acted swiftly, and eventually the company turned around. In yet another scenario, a roofer uses history to get to the bottom of a problem. When did you first notice the leak? Does it leak every time it rains? Have you ever repaired the roof? What exactly have you done? He is helping people solve their problems. There are so many different things that could be causing a leaky roof. By asking all sorts of questions, he may be able to narrow down where the problem is originating so he can fix it for good. Sesno also explains how important it is to challenge the expert. Just because they're the expert does not mean they have the answers to all the questions. His mother had been ill and was butting heads with her current doctor. It seemed like they were not answering her question regarding what to expect from the chemo she would soon be receiving. Sesno asked the same questions and would not back down. He then asked what they were to expect. The doctor simply responded, "Every patient is different, you can't predict." Sesno wanted them to predict. He pushed harder. He got the questions answered, even though they may have been hard to hear. Diagnostic questions identify a problem, a cause, and a response. Then it's time to strategize. Now what? What should we be watching for? Do we have a sustainable business model? It doesn't matter what you do. You have to diagnose a problem to solve it. Sometimes I feel like I'm drawn towards problems. I love challenges, and I love to fix things. I have found throughout my career and personal life that asking questions is so important to finding the right solution. It's also a way I identify methods to creatively solve problems that may not be so obvious. My mission? How can I help? Hard problems are out there though, like staff retention. It became clear through many meetings and surveys at my job, the problem was not necessarily a person, rather a lack of effective training. I have focused a decent amount of time to boosting up our training system over the years, creating mentor-mentee relationships, and seeking more input from staff leaders to what would work best and how to best move forward. Asking the right questions of the right people helps lead to an appropriate diagnosis. The methodical, logical approach to scientific investigation provides a blueprint for inquiry that rewards reality, not emotion, one step at a time. Sesno interviewed Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was once upon a time in the thick of the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. He was there when people started dying, and they couldn't figure out why. He spent many years seeking the answers. Fauci started with the facts. Gay men were dying of something peculiar according to CDC reports. He formulated a question, which basically asked why this was happening. His hypothesis was this was a new autoimmune disease no one has seen before. Scientific inquiry always starts with a hypothesis. What if we try this? Then the next step is to try and prove yourself wrong. This is what peer studies are all about, looking to others to also try and prove you wrong. After all the trials, if the hypothesis still stands true, then maybe you are onto something. Through experimentation, it is possible to learn new things, but it's also important to consider all the information. Sesno describes an example where you may have gotten into a car accident, are in lots of pain, and want to know if yoga will help. You try it, and after a couple of months you start to feel better. Then the question becomes, is it the yoga that's making the difference, or is your body just healing over time? That's the hypothesis. To experiment, he explained, you stop doing yoga for a few days and find the pain returns. By tracking the pain scale throughout the day, it seems like it's bad in the morning, better in the afternoon, but worse again in the evening. So you try yoga again, and although the pain is still there in the morning, it isn't as bad. In the evening, pain gets a lot better. Still hard to be certain the yoga is the only thing helping, but that little experiment helped produce desired outcomes. Fauci did not have it easy. Even after they figured out what was causing AIDS, they found it could mutate. It would take more time to find the right drugs to make the difference. Now, AIDS isn't the death sentence it once was. Scientific questioning looks at the big mysteries. It relies on observation and measurement, and it demands patience. It forces us to ask deep questions like, what do we see and what do we actually know? How do we know what we know, and how might we explain it? Could we be wrong? And what's the next question to ask? I have always liked science, and I like being given the opportunity to try something new. Just like with diagnostic questioning, I love to solve problems, and this is kind of the next part. Something I had not considered prior to this book was just how much of the scientific process involves trying to disprove your own hypothesis. I have always seen it as trying to find the right way, but it makes way more sense to consider the wrong way. I usually use trial and error to figure things out. My hypothesis would give me the ability to try multiple ways, and more questions come throughout the process. Why did this work? Why didn't this work? As Sesno says, there is more research to be done, new discoveries to make. Although the scientific method is distanced from feelings, in my line of work, feelings are everything. When a problem needs to be solved, sometimes it is important to step away from a situation where personal feelings can get in the way. If your good friend is involved in an altercation, or your child is ill, the best thing you can do is ultimately consider all solutions and push emotions to the side. With that said, feelings are usually just as important a part of the inquiry process. Empathetic questions seek deeper, more emotional answers to explore what makes people tick, think, fear, and feel. They help people reveal themselves to others and sometimes to themselves. Perspective is crucial when considering these types of questions. Sesno considers a time he interviewed recipients of welfare benefits in the wake of some major changes. He explained the public would hear from those making the change or paying for the change more often, but very rarely from those receiving the support. These families were struggling. They were trying. One woman expressed her excitement about a job opportunity she was interviewing for. When it was revealed how much it would pay, he wondered how she would afford childcare. and if she would have health care. These were things the woman didn't know. It can be difficult not to empathize with her situation as you relive experiences alongside. What's it like to experience what that person is going through? What are other people feeling? In an interview with Helen Reese, a clinical professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, she referred to perspective taking, where one assumes the other's point of view. She teaches doctors how to establish empathetic relationships through not only being sincere in their lines of questioning, but also to listen. Communication is not just through words, but also through tone and body language. In formal interview settings, where you're trying to get more information from a person about difficult subjects, it's also important to be judgment-free. If people feel comfortable and at ease, they will open up. Judgments may cloud perspective taking. I have taken this to heart and teach others to remove judgment in all situations. Working with children, I encourage teachers and parents to consider perceptions of young children. For example, a child comes to you saying Tommy pushed them. Your first instinct may be to find Tommy and punish him for pushing. When you try and do this, Tommy gets upset and tries to say he didn't push the child, but you believe the other child and Tommy must leave the play space. Empathy is learned in early childhood, modeled through close adults. Looking at this situation without judgment, things may go differently. When the child came to you saying Tommy pushed them, asking what was going on is a better place to start. The child was playing on the tires and Tommy was climbing up next to them and they got pushed. You asked the child if they thought Tommy was trying to hurt them, and the child exclaims that Tommy lost his balance, causing him to nearly fall, but he regained his grip when he fell into the child. By looking past the initial claim and asking more questions, we see how this situation was accidental. This is a learning opportunity to figure out how to safely climb the tires rather than a moment where a child was being aggressive. By taking the judgment away, it opens our eyes to broader perspectives and consequently a much more positive scenario. I believe the expression goes, the only bad questions are the ones not asked. As a leader, it's imperative I ask questions so I can help others, solve problems, and gain perspective. There are so many other types of questions too. Sesno also explains strategic questions, bridging questions, controversial questions, creativity questions, mission questions, interview questions, entertaining questions, and legacy questions. Each different line of questioning is meant to gain information, elicit details, and engage with others around you. What types of questions will help you on your journey?